It says now participants can see my application, so I hope this is true. On this picture, you see two gardens. There is, to the right, a medieval picture, painting, scraped off the internet. So that's what it is. And it's got fruit trees and sort of these somewhat more elaborate gardens and waterways, as we can see. And the picture to the left is supposed to be from the Prophet city Medina. It's a photograph from current time, and it shows palm tree cultivations, I think date palms, and shows how vegetation, herbs, and greenery is growing in the shades among the palm trees. So two types of use of gardens for farming and agriculture. So this is a topic I will get back to in this talk. Oops. Next slide. There. The outline of the talk, very briefly, is first to go through the research background and thesis, which is based on two books by me who have come out recently. And in these books, I also explain the reason for the rather dubious, perhaps, translations that I make of the Qur'an. After that, I will go through natural law and social contract theory, and then interpret some Quranic verses with reference to these two theories. I will then go into the agricultural context of the Qur'an, that is the thesis, and also then look at a couple of verses and then hopefully conclude. So, on to the research survey, which starts with a study by Ziaul Haq from 1977. And he is dealing with the thing called sharecropping, muzara, which means that farming was done as a kind of agreement or lease, where landlords lease land to peasants and then take a share of their produce as well. And according to Haq, in the early Islamic period, i.e. from the Prophet to Omar ibn al-Khattab, sharecropping was considered problematic because of the role of landlords, who tended to be the powerful party in relation to peasants. So there are various positions in the hadith material on whether sharecropping is allowed or not allowed. But what is agreed on is that the agricultural lands that were conquered under Omar, and partly under the Prophet's time as well, they were to be kept for the collective benefit of the community. And then Haq shows how in the early jurisprudence, fiqh, and in the context of the Islamic imperial states, peasants become owners of their own labor and land through a proper sharecropping contract with landlords with stipulated conditions. But one could say that he points out that landlords are a sort of persistent systemic problem in relation to peasants' rights and farming. Next study is Andrew Watson from 1983, which develops a thesis that in Islamic polities between 700 and 1000, there was agricultural innovation and growth taking place due to several factors, including peasants' property rights, legal universalism, so the application of Islamic law across regions, trade and markets, and then onto water, irrigation techniques, and use of gardens for cultivation, and also fertilizing and improving soils, developing new fruits and crops on that basis. But he points out from the 900s, he argues, one can see a certain decline, which could be due to climate factors, but he also points out that landlords appear to reassert their power from that period. Moving on to Baber Johansson's study from 1988 of Hanafi fiqh. Then he points out that in the early Hanafi jurisprudence, peasants' property rights are protected through the sharecropping contracts, whereas from the 900s onwards, i.e. the same period that Watson pointed to, Hanafi writings reflect a reassertion of landlords and thus a weakening of the peasants' contractual rights. Then I also rely on another type of study, which is Jan Retsö's thick monograph from 2003, The Arabs from Antiquity to the Umayyads, where he argues that it's important, he says, to notice that the Arabs were largely settled in villages, engaged in agriculture and small animal husbandry. And he also connects this with the Quranic word for the Arabic language, Arabi, which he argues, based on the dictionary Lisan al-Arab by Ibn Manzur, he says this root, Arabi, connotes contractual security and clarity of terms. So a certain semantic connection in the term Arabi to contract. So summing this up, I have then defined my thesis that one can see the Quran and read it against a background context of legal and agricultural development. And I'm now relying on a remark in Stephen Humphrey's historical study from 1991, where he in his turn points out that some have argued that the agricultural innovation started already in the late 500s, which would place the Quran on the trajectory, historically speaking. Then I argue that this is reflected in theoretical paradigms in the Quran, natural law theory, and social contract theory. And there are topics then that I will explore with reference to this context in these theories, such as contract, divine sustenance, land, and then specifically also water and gardens. So what is then natural law theory, the first theory? I'm relying on a scholar, Kenneth Einar Himma, who defines natural law theory of law in this way, that the law gains its authority through its logical relationship with a moral standard, i.e. not from human convention. I then argue that in Islamic jurisprudence, the Quran is the moral standard that authorizes the law, but in the Quran itself, there is also a moral standard defined, which I then hypothesize is contract. And the key verse here is from Surah 7, verse 172. When your Lord took from Adam's offspring, from their backs, their descendants, and made them testify against themselves, am I not your Lord? They said, so you are, we testify, so that you cannot say on the day of standing to trial, but we were unaware of this. This is a contract, and contract plays a key role in the Quran and in fiqh as a legal principle and as a technical form, preferably in written form. It can take the form of a compact, but also of sharecropping contract, of trusts and waqfs, it can be debt contracts, sale and purchase of farm produce, among other things. It can be a marriage contract. The important thing is that contract represents mutual agreement on terms and requires mutual fulfillment. And oaths are sometimes also used to seal the contract. So I have then picked 2 verses to show how this contract standard is derived and applied in other places in the Qur'an. Here from Surah 3, verses 76 to 77. Indeed, whoever meets the terms of his compact with God and fulfills his obligations, indeed, God loves those who fulfill their obligations. Indeed, those who buy by God's compact and their oaths for a low price shall have no part in the here beyond, and God will neither speak to them or look their way at the day of standing to trial, nor will he purify them, for they shall have a painful chastisement. So here we see how buying for a low price, for example, farm produce, is a negative thing that would violate God's compact. One should pay fair prices. Second theory, social contract. Here I'm relying simply on Encyclopedia Britannica. Social contract is an actual or hypothetical compact or agreement between the ruled or between the ruled and their rulers, defining the rights and duties of each. So one can also see the moral standard of contract in Surah 7, verse 172, as an example of a compact between God, the Lord, and Adam's offspring, defining the duties and rights of each, as we shall see in the derivation here, where one example that I've picked is from Surah 4, verses 57 to 59. Those who have enacted security and acted for the common good, we will let enter gardens under which waterways flow, remaining there forever. There they have ritually purified spouses, and we will let them all enter shades that shelter. God commands you all to deliver trusts to their owners. When you pass judgment between people, to judge with justice. Indeed, God is material blessing by which he exhorts you. God is indeed an all-hearing one who supervises everything. O you who have enacted security, obey God and obey the messenger and those with authority to command among you. So if you dispute over a legal matter, you should refer it to God and the messenger, if you are ones who enact security through God and the furthest day. That is the most good and the fairest regarding interpretation. So here you see how the compact in Surah 7 applies also to obedience to God and the messenger, so the prophet. Another example.
Can I move you towards conclusion?
Oh dear. Okay. Another example is, which I'm skipping actually.
I apologize.
I'll move on to the agricultural context here. So the divine sustenance then is a kind of contract between God and humans that follows from the big compact. God sustains humans through material blessings, including then what can grow through water. So water, gardens, and agriculture is a kind of proof or sign of God's divine sustenance of humans. And it's here that I'm arguing that this is more than metaphors, because it actually reflects real agriculture going on. And I would like to just read this example from Surah 16, verses 10 and 11. It is God who makes water descend from the sky. From it you have drink, and from it come shrubs on which you graze your cattle. By it he grows for you vegetation, olive trees, date palms, vines, and all kinds of fruit. Surely in that is a sign for people who reflect. And Surah 6, verse 99. It is God who makes water descend from the sky, by which we have brought forth all kinds of plants. By it we have brought forth greenery, clustered grains, and from the date palm shoots, bunches of dates hanging low in gardens with grapes, olive trees, and pomegranates, alike and not alike. Look at their fruits when they bud and ripen. Surely these are signs for people. And so on. And then there are also eschatological references to garden and water. But my point is that...
Would you carry on? If you can make a concluding point, that would be great.
Yeah. So 2 ways of use of water in gardens. One that has to do with actual agriculture that people can see. Another one that concerns the eschatological future. Those who are holding the compact with God, they will get to the eternal garden, and the others to the fire. Then I'm working my way here. This is conclusion. There are also very interesting references to weak groups in the land who will be strengthened through God and his contract, including the Israelites as a historical example, and the prophets people, actually. So there is a kind of strengthening here of those who have been weak in the land. Conclusion. The Quran reflects contract as a moral standard, including, of course, the most basic one, the compact between God and humans, where God promises divine sustenance, material sustenance of humans, and humans promise servitude. This applies to land and inheritance, which refers to real agriculture, which depends on water so that you can have plants and gardens and feed and water your cattle, etc. It also refers to eschatology, where you have hell and fire for those who break the contract, and you have gardens and water again for those who hold it. Thank you very much, and sorry for overloading the talk, which I always tend to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much.